both actually this question more to the other. Do you want to start first?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Yeah?
Yeah.
There we go.
What has led me to my practice, my current journey? Well, it was a bit of a happy accident, really. I used to think that I wanted to be an actor, and I decided that I would go to uni and do English instead because, you know, my dad was like, acting's not a lucrative profession. But I always really liked reading plays and novels and poems and the kind of the story world that maybe as an actor I would have been able to immerse myself in. So I went to uni and did English, and then started reading lots of poetry and plays, and then became a writer, which is probably less of a lucrative profession than an actor. So yeah, I just started getting really involved in the live literature scene around London and going to open mic nights, and went to a course at the Roundhouse in Camden, and just kind of took it from there, really. And then suddenly I was doing it full time.
And not that dissimilar for myself. I also have an English degree, and I actually used to be an actor for a while. I had an agent all the way through university and did quite a lot of acting in school. I was also in the writing society when I was at uni, and I got kind of quite jaded about acting, really. I found it was quite tough, it was quite boring, sort of having to read other people's lines and going to all these auditions, and it didn't feel very creative. So I started writing my own poetry and performing it. And I've just been kind of involved in doing that ever since. I moved down to London, and I have ended up very, very fortunately from doing lots of gigs and just sort of getting out there, doing what I do today.
The themes that I pursue in my work are very much kind of the universal things that we all experience, but kind of framed through like what I've seen and what I've experienced. I think writing for me has always been a way of kind of figuring stuff out, and a way of kind of confronting things and containing them, and I guess kind of reconciling things and finding some empowerment from chaos. So I write generally about things that I've been through, the things that we all go through as humans, really, like loss and love and how we feel about our homes and our environments and what we want and what our anxieties and fears are and stuff. I think like what Jemima was saying earlier about kind of stepping away from acting or whatever, I think the great thing about what we do is it's so much about yourself, what you write, and that kind of, it's so much about what you've experienced. You write it and you share it with audiences, and there's a real kind of connection from that you get. You really kind of you offer up this experience to an audience or to a community, and you have an exchange because of that, like communication. It's like a collaborative experience, which I find really, really cool. And I think that kind of writing about universal experience goes hand in hand with that idea of kind of like that offering to an audience. So I just write about life, I suppose.
Write about life, yes. I am really interested in writing about the minutiae of everyday life. I think I sort of really like the idea that a poem can be about anything, that it can be about someone sort of sneezing on a train or whatever. And it's about kind of finding wonder in those things. I like writing about the city, I like writing about memory. They're sort of themes I'm particularly interested in at the moment, sort of how memory works. And that ties into the current IOU show as well. I also write quite a lot from my own experience, but fictionalize it. And the other sort of really key thing for me is music, because I sing in my poetry as well, and I use music quite a lot as a starting point for my work. So whether that be being sort of inspired by a particular song, or exploring what that song might mean in terms of a certain memory, or using music to add more to poetry. I think I write about music quite a lot as well.
Do I have a mentor? When I first started writing, I was part of a collective of young writers based at the Roundhouse, called the Roundhouse Poetry Collective. So the idea was that we met up every Sunday and wrote together for, a few hours every Sunday afternoon for like a year. And so through that project I received mentoring, but I also developed a network of kind of like-minded peers, like writers of a similar age to me, who I'm still friends with now, who are my first port of call if I need them to read something new for me, or if I just want to sit and do some free writing with them or whatever. So I've got a lot of kind of really, really established friends for life because of the way that I started writing. So I feel like they're kind of my mentors, or they're my community, really.
And for me, I would say I have a few. Bit cheesy to say, but my parents, because they both work in the arts. My dad was a musician and composer for years and is now a visual artist. My mum used to run Square Chapel in Halifax. So I'm very fortunate to sort of have both of those guys to get advice from. In terms of writing, I wasn't as lucky as Cecilia in having a sort of structured group, but similarly, some of my very good friends from the Writing Society at University of Manchester, I always go to for writing advice, and also a poet called Luke Wright, who definitely has really, really helped me get my foot on the ladder and gives me quite a lot of really useful career advice and stuff.
What's the best piece of advice I've ever been given? I think just, this sounds so cheesy, but I think just to be true to your own voice. Like, I was mentored by a writer called Stephen Camden for a while, who also goes by the name of Polar Bear. And I'd write a poem and then I'd go to like a poetry night or whatever, and I'd say, oh, but I don't want to do it because the person that went before me was like super funny or really clever and blah blah blah, and he was just like, so what? They're not you and you're not them. Like, how much more powerful is it to go and be different, or to go and surprise a crowd, or provide a paradox to what's just come before? So I think just finding the confidence to really own what you're trying to say and how you're trying to say it, because so often we try and emulate other people, or we don't feel confident in our own strengths and in our own style. And I think it's almost kind of like a rebellion in itself to be like, oh, this is what I do and this is what I do well, and I'm going to sort of pursue that and just get better at doing that, I guess.
The best piece of advice I've ever been given in terms of writing is don't get it right, get it written, which I think is just really useful. It doesn't mean that you can just produce any old crap or share any old crap, but it means that you can produce any old crap, because it's kind of just really hammering home the idea that, you can go around saying that you're a writer or you're a poet all you like, but unless you actually spend a lot of time writing, then it's almost sort of like a scattershot approach. Just if you write and write and write and write and write, you can go back to that stuff and you can think, this is all terrible. But out of 3 pages, you might have 2 lines or two words that just sound really good together, or one image, and you can create a whole new really good piece, really good poem, really good theatre piece just from that tiny, tiny, tiny little bit. So I think that's a really important thing for me, to sort of not censor yourself, to write and of course read as well, as much as possible, and collect the gems from the rubble.